introduction to her stand-up set.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Cool. Okay, so I did a year-long project in stand-up comedy, which started 1 year ago. Like most great things, it started with watching Netflix. Has anybody seen a Netflix stand-up comedy special? Yeah?
Yeah.
What'd you watch?
Oh, I watched a lot of them. I watched Ellen's and Sweetie Martin's and Ricky Gervais and a lot of them.
Yeah, Grace?
John Mulaney.
Right. A classic.
I've seen Ellen too. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the Ellen special. I haven't gotten around to the Dimitri Martin yet, but I've been meaning to. Yeah, so I started watching a lot of Netflix stand-up comedy specials because Netflix started making their own specials, like produced by Netflix, which has made stand-up comedy a lot more accessible to people, and like me. And that was the same time that applications for this designation came out, where you pitched your project, and so those two merged together. And I decided on stand-up comedy before I had really ever thought or considered actually doing stand-up comedy. I had no experience. I had only done spoken word poetry before and the plays at school. So that was a big leap for me, but I didn't make that leap for a really long time. I spent most of the summer doing research. And so I started off with improv with people like Del Close, and then I moved into old stand-up comedians like Morris Saul, who I really liked because he came on stage with a stool and a newspaper, and he read the headlines in real time from that day and came up with jokes on the fly. And so not only was that really impressive, it was really radical at the time because people hadn't really merged politics and comedy into the same place. And now I feel like the market is saturated with that, but one of the great things about that was it was fresh. And also George Carlin, I'm not sure. It was last summer, so I don't really remember. George Carlin was known for the way he chose his words and how performative it was. He went on stage knowing every word that he was going to say in the order that he was going to say them, which is way different from now. I feel like most of the trendy stand-up comedy now is stream of consciousness, personal stories, most of the things that I'm going to be doing tonight because I'm more heavily influenced by stand-up comedians today, the people that I see all the time on Netflix. So I have great respect for all these comedians, but I have not yet found a way to channel my everyday life that I'm living today into past forms of stand-up comedy. So I started doing open mics at the Root Cafe in Lakewood in the fall. And most of those are boys playing guitar and singing. There's not a whole lot of women or stand-up comedians, which was interesting. All the performers sit at the same table while they're waiting to perform. And so you get to meet some colorful people, and you're all sitting there watching each other and congratulating. It was a nice community, but there was one boy in particular. He was 19, 20, like 19 or 20, and he kept saying Borman as like an adjective, like this. So, but it was like some lingo I wasn't in on. He would order a sandwich, he'd be like, "Ah, man, it's such a Borman sandwich. You know, it's like a Borman way to eat this sandwich. Or like, got this coat on, it's like a Borman coat. Like, it's just such a Borman way to wear this coat." And I really didn't know what to make of it. I didn't know how to ask. I didn't want to seem not cool. I was the only high schooler there and also the only girl, and it felt like a weird time to ask. But there was this one time I was waiting for my mom to pick me up. I didn't drive yet, and I was waiting outside, and his set hadn't come, and so he was waiting outside with me, and he was wearing his Borman jacket, and so he was telling me about how Borman this jacket was, and I was waiting, and I was like, "I'm sorry, I have to ask, what does Borman mean?" He goes, "Oh man, I'm Jacob Borman, nice to meet you." So yeah, I feel lucky to be able to tell that joke because he's actually a really good singer. That's not on brand for that story, but I want to tell that before he gets famous because then I feel like he doesn't ruin it. Yeah, so I feel like I learned a lot at the Root. I had my own show there in January. I invited a lot of my friends and family, which had its pros and cons. Pros, it was a really nice audience. I feel like everybody laughed because they're used to laughing at my jokes that aren't funny. And so they were all very nice and they said I did great. Cons, I felt weird introducing it to people because it'd be like family dinner or something and I felt like I was, I don't know, bringing up weird business. Like, "Oh, like speaking of that sports game you went to, why don't you come to my comedy special next week? I don't really know if they knew what to expect. I think they expected an open mic similar to what I've been doing for months. But no, I reserved the night for myself. There was nobody opening or closing for me, which was terrifying. And I filmed the whole thing. It was a very, most people have like a tight 10, comedians work up time, like a tight 10, a tight 15, just solid jokes back to back. I had like a very loose 60.
Oh, wow.
It was, I felt really bad afterward, but I didn't feel like that at the time, so I didn't know that it was going to be a loose 60. And so I had the camera up and I recorded the whole thing and I thought this is going to be great. Most comedians film themselves to learn about their act and like know how to change their physicality on stage to be more effective. I haven't watched it. I can't. Oh my god, I hate listening to my own voice. Like, so yeah. I'm also filming tonight. I know I'm not gonna watch it. I know I'm just not. Maybe it'll be for when I get famous. I'll sell it for like thousands of dollars, but not today. Yeah. So that was nice. I feel like Jacob also had a lot of other really nice quotes, but they were quotes that you thought were gonna have an end and they just didn't. Like, one time I was talking to him, and he said, sometimes it's just, like, really sick for there to, like, be someone, Still waiting on the end of that one, but I think it's nice. I had someone for a while. I had a boyfriend named Cameron. He dumped me and then skateboarded away. So you can't really get more high school than that. I feel like I reached my peak, once he skateboarded away. And I feel like I've been trying to build up a reputation like as the comedian. Like I tell a lot of jokes in real life. I talk about comedians a lot. I started laughing. I couldn't do it. Like he was skateboarding and I was and so he was skateboarding away and he stopped. He was going like this and what are you laughing at? And so I said, this is funny. You look exactly like the kind of boy to do this. And you're doing it right now, unironically. And so he stops and he goes, yeah, but on the brick road, the skateboard kind of sounds like a Harley. He didn't drive. He was 18 years old and he didn't know how to drive. And that's why he was skateboarding. I don't know. So yeah, sometimes it's sick for there to be someone, but sometimes it's really not. And I don't know. I feel like I've gotten a lot from performing in front of people that I know, but it's going to be great to go out into college when nobody knows me, and I'll be able to get more honest reactions for these sort of things. So part of this designation is getting an outside experience, and I have yet to fulfill that part. I'm gonna get to it, I promise. So part of my outside experience, before I really learned about what was required, I figured my open mics would count because you're getting immediate feedback from everybody all the time. But it's also hard to count that feedback as educational experience at an open mic because, I don't know, those people are also eating soup and not really paying attention to you. And so there's challenges with performing when you're under 18 at open mics that aren't really meant for stand-up comedy. And so that brings us to right now with this show. That was supposed to be a star, but it's there. So I usually start off my shows with a secret with you guys so that we can all get to know each other better, but it's just me, and so you know me better. The secret that I've usually used for the past year is I've been white my whole life, and I still don't know how to play cornhole. That felt really good to share. But I figured I'd change it up for you guys, because, it's a special night. It's my last one at HB as a high schooler. So, do you guys know the dance Millie rocking? Yeah? All right, so let's show them. Can anybody demonstrate? No? All right, feel free. I will do it for you. So I was Millie rocking like a fiend in the shower, like a fiend, it was a bop. There was a bop playing, and I was Millie rocking. And I may or may not have hit my hand on the shower caddy just a little too aggressively. So I got out of the shower, and there was a bit of a bruise on my hand. It was bruising. I'm very pale, and I can't dance very well. And there was a big bruise. And I didn't know what I was going to do about it. It was like a day later, and it really looked like a bruise. And this was on a Sunday at this point. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to tell people at school. There's this bruise on my hand. I was like, all right, I'm going to tell people I got into a fight. Okay? I was giving her the 1-2. and I hit her across the side, and I got a bruise, you know? I really won, too, but it was hard, it was tough. And so Monday morning, I was walking into school, I was like, all right, 1, 2, hit her with the, you know, yeah. And nobody asked. Not one. So now I finally got to use that move with you guys. Yeah, I'm not really smooth like that. I don't have a lot of ways to cap things like that. I don't have I feel like stand-up doesn't really fit into normal conversation like that. You can't really just mess around with like miming and stuff or like skateboarding away. You can't do that when you're talking to your friends at lunch. And so I feel like stand-up pops up in real life in weird places. Like, for example, so I bought this red jumpsuit. Most of you know where this is going. So I bought this red jumpsuit at a vintage clothing store. So it was really meant for like the 1980s and like definitely not someone just going out in normal life. But so I bought it and I come home and I'm like, hey mom, look, I bought a red jumpsuit. The zipper goes to here and it's long sleeve and it goes down here. It's bright red. The whole thing is red, all of it. And she says, you can't wear that to school. Okay, so I got that. And I didn't have anywhere to wear it. I was waiting. It was in my closet. It was ironed. I never iron things. It was ironed. And I was waiting to wear it. And a friend of mine whose mom was going to have an art exhibit on the west side. And she invited me to go there. And I was like, all right, anytime you can wear funky clothes, an art exhibit, right? Like, you have to. So I wore the jumpsuit. It was very uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable. I had never, like, sat down with it on. But, like, it, you know, it's like one size, and it's your whole body. It's just not gonna fit. So I'm just sitting in the car, and we're instantly regretting this decision, but you know, still trucking. And so I get to the first exhibit, and I'm talking with my friends, and to her, this is just like her mom's work. Like, there's all these interesting people. There's cheese. There's paintings. Like, things are being sold. There's lots of money. Like, a $1,000 painting was just sold, and she's just sitting in the back with like some grapes. You know, she doesn't really care. And so we're sitting there on stools, and this guy is over there with his like adult friends, you know, like talking to his painter friend. I don't know if his friend's mom was there, but he was over there, and he was looking at me weird. Not even like, I don't know, a creepy guy looking at you, but like a this. He was leaning out of the conversation. I'm surprised his friends didn't like check up on him. He was like this. My back just cracked. That's how weird this was. And he's looking at me, and I didn't know what to say, so I was like, guys, be cool, but like, it's right over there, and he's looking at me like, I can't lean over in this jumpsuit. Like, it's really bad, I don't know what to do. And he's over here, and he finally says something. All of his friends are walking away, and he goes, Devo? I didn't know who Devo was. So I said, no. And he said, ah, and he walked away. So that was the first jumpsuit incident of the night. And so we walked uncomfortably over to another exhibit across the street. And there was this guy who was doing metal work. So it was like fountains and statues all made of like different scrap metal that he had recycled. And there was like music playing in the background. And it was a very different scene than what we had just seen because there was almost no one there also. So he was very ready to talk to us. And we come in, music is playing, I'm looking around, I'm talking to my friends. And the one friend whose mom's exhibit it was talking to him because she knew him. And so we made our way around the exhibit, and we go around to talk to him. And he looks at me, and he goes, you know, it's so funny, because a Devo song was playing right when you came in. And I was like, okay, Devo's a band. Devo, band. Got it, okay. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my god, that's so funny, because Devo is actually my favorite band. Like, that's so crazy that you mentioned that. Yeah, I wore the jumpsuit just for that. And so we were talking, and it didn't last much longer after that. There's only so much small talk you can make with a guy who makes fountains alone. And so we left. We went back across the street. And the other exhibit was already closing. Paintings were coming down. The cheese was almost gone. And we were talking to the people who owned the gallery. And one of them said, you know, Devo's from Akron. I said, oh yeah, I know, this is one of the original jumpsuits. He was really impressed, needless to say. He was also from Akron, did not even sense that I was kidding. So yeah, I never explained my fight joke, but I feel like I made up for it with the Devo, you know? Like, it comes out in mysterious places. it's difficult learning how to set up a joke like that. I'm going to talk mechanically a little bit about that story. I feel like at the time that it happened, it just felt like a weird thing, you know, and like it was an interesting night, but at the end, like I was tired and I wanted to go home, so I just went home and I went to bed. But then the next morning, I started thinking about it, and like I told a friend that story and she started laughing. And so I wrote it down, but then you never write down the things that you want. You want like the whole scene, you want how it happened, you want how they reacted, so that you can pull all the things that were funny later. But you just don't have that. And so I feel like it's changed over time. Like the first time I told that story, there was a lot less detail. I didn't think it was that interesting, and now we're also on a time limit here, so I'm really trying to stretch it. But yeah, so I feel like I set up a lot of my jokes like this. I have a timeline, and I have the first exhibit, and then the second exhibit across the street, and the same one, and how I'm going to mention that thread about the music playing, and things like that. And so I'm a very visual person. I set up a lot of my jokes like this, and I color code them with where I'm moving, like whether I'm going to put that guy over there, and things like that. And so that was a big part that I learned from performing mostly, but not really at open mics, more at things like this, or cabaret if you came to that, things like that, because there's not a lot of room at an open mic. I feel like, I don't know if you guys have been to the Root Cafe. If you went to that January show, you probably did, but it's like you're walking in the middle of a movie theater aisle, and you're like, sorry, excuse me, sorry, and it's like people drinking $8 iced coffee, and it's like, I don't know. If you knock it down, like, who's to say? So it was nice to learn spatially, and I feel like the only previous experience I've had is in plays and spoken word poetry, and you're really glued to the microphone there, and you have your poem there, because, I don't know, I'm in high school, I haven't memorized those poems yet, you know, so I'm reading here, and, you know, you got, like, the Sarah Kay, like, poetry, like, the flower grew, I can't do that, so all of this is improv. I didn't practice any of these hands and things like that, and so that was one thing I've definitely had to grow more comfortable with. I mean, you know this is improv, I've dropped this marker like 3 times. So, yeah, I feel like one last thing that I've learned a lot about with stand-up is that people will tell you anything they know about stand-up the minute you mention it. You don't even have to ask. I never have, and I still get a lot. I met this one boy at a summer program who I told him I was doing a program. I was doing a project in stand-up comedy. I was talking about this research, and he said, oh, you know, like, I know a lot of stand-up comedy. I watch SNL, and I was like, you know, SNL isn't really stand-up. And he's like, already talking about something different. And he was telling me, he's like, you know, I have this joke set up. You can feel free to use it if you want. I was like, yeah, what's up? He was like, okay, so you're telling a story, right? You're telling a story, and it's going one way. And everybody thinks it's going that one way. And then you change it. That's how I met my fiance Xavier. We're getting married in June, so yeah. And then a lot of weird stuff with school. I announce these shows at like morning meeting and stuff, which is a whole other set of things. For example, a teacher who I've never had and never talked to came up to me and asked if I thought stand-up was conducive to this kind of school environment. Which is such a weird thing to say out loud. I'm not sure how to answer that question. He asked me, you know, like an all-girls high school, and I was like, well, yeah, I mean, there's tons of material. I feel like, for example, I was in English class the other day, and we were talking about Atonement. Has anybody read Atonement? Yeah? Like, crazy love story, like my favorite book of all time. And someone raised their hand and said, with their mouth, it's just, like, crazy that, like, so many people, like, you know? You know what, it is, like, so crazy, like, so many people, you know? I'm not sure how you can use that isn't conducive to an all-girls high school environment, but, I don't know, part of it is also being vulnerable. I feel like I've been vulnerable in the school a lot over these 4 years, and so this is a great culmination of all the things that I've learned and putting myself out there. And it's really vulnerable telling all you guys these stories, because they're like parts of my life, and I'm just making it very public, and I feel, it's a little emotional, but I won't cry. And, yeah, so with that conversation about being vulnerable, and I will be taking questions. Yeah, do you guys have any about stand-up?
So you talk about structurally trying to apply, at this point, like a 30-year-old at least standard to your humor and your experience. Isn't that what you're doing? Trying to make these incredibly structured, like talk about Carlin, incredibly structured bits. Don't you feel that you've already managed that?
I feel like I've managed the timing of stand-up comedy, like moving, like joke, transition, joke. I mean, I stopped to look at my notes for a few times, which I shouldn't have, but I think, yes, like the outline has been the same, but I don't think I think about language in the same way he has. For example, he does have like the 7 worst words in the English language. I cannot say them here, they're all awful words, but he like says them in this rhythmic way and repeats them throughout his show and uses them in jokes and like uses them in examples of like when you swear in a joke, it's objectively funnier because people aren't expecting it. And I don't think I think of language in that way just yet. I think I start with the idea and go from there, whereas Carlin thinks about the whole thing and then performs it. I don't think I have that yet.
So, the first time I heard this Devo story was in January.
Yes.
And then I heard a cabaret, and then
Right.
I'm hearing it today.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right. It's a good one.
How did it, like, change? Like, it's changed every time I've heard it, but, like, how did you, like, develop it?
That's a really good question. So, the first time I told that story was to my friend Tasha, and she, like the parts that she laughed at definitely get bigger. So I feel like every time that somebody laughs at a story or that like they hear it, it reflects the piece a little bit more. So that sounds really professional for just telling jokes, but like, for example, I feel like at the end, like I was mad at myself later for saying that it was one of the original jumpsuits. I was mad, I thought I could come up with like a better punchline. I thought I could like replace it later and tell a different story, but I started realizing that like that was like getting a laugh and I was happy with it because it was more honest. And so I think like telling more detail about like the way that guy was standing and things like that have been emphasized more. So the story's gotten longer and richer, but also a little bit more true to the people in it.
You know, it seems like storytelling to me. I like really short storytelling. I'm wondering, do you write? You know, do you write short stories, things like that? I mean, do you write comedy?
I wrote
But you
essays.
just write and don't perform, kind of thing.
Yeah, I wrote essays for AP Lang in retrospect, but those were mostly personal and less funny. They were a little bit more emotional. I feel like I found a lot of my voice in that English class, and I hope to write essays later, but I haven't really gotten around to it senior year. Yeah. And
Good
so,
storyteller, yeah.
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, I definitely hope it's in my future.
Me too.
Have you seen any stand-up comedians live?
I have. I saw Bo Burnham on his Make Happy tour, which
I'm so jealous.
yeah. Yeah, you should be. It was really cool. But like that's an odd stand-up comedian to see live because he very much integrates like musical theater into his work. A lot of it is songs, and he like mixes up like tech and music into all of his jokes. So he jokes often that he's like not a traditional stand-up comedian. So it was like weird to see the echo of stand-up comedy live instead of like the actual thing, because he was very much commenting on it. The whole Make Happy tour was about performance art in itself and like the ethics and morals of like how much money he made on the tour and how much money the people who buy his tickets make and things like that. So that was interesting. I also saw another stand-up comedian at The Root. He performed when I was still doing poetry, so I didn't really think of it, but it was really bad. So I don't want to, I haven't really drawn from that.
Okay. Then my follow-up question is there a difference in viewing stand-up comedy from what you've seen on like Netflix or other recorded versions versus live?
Yes, I think so. I think when you're at home, like, okay, I make a blanket burrito. So I curl up on this side, and then my laptop is like horizontal this way, and I'm in my bed, and I'm like listening. I'm like, that's not that funny. And then a few days later, I'll be walking around. I'm like, actually, that's really funny. And so I feel like I'm much more critical. I'm also not someone that laughs out loud on my own. And so when you're watching a recorded version, you're hearing the laugh, but you're not really feeling it. But in a live audience, I feel like you're more compelled to laugh. Like I think if you like, I'm pretty funny, I think, but if you guys saw a recording of this, I don't think you would be laughing out loud in the same way. And I think that's just part of like the experience of going.
I have another question. Do you have like a favorite bit, like from like a certain comedian? Like, is there something that like you go back to and like listen to again and again, just 'cause like you love it so much?
Oh man, okay, I have to think for like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
On this.
Let's have that be the last question. Thanks, Grace.
Yes. Okay, I do. Okay, so Mike Birbiglia is my favorite stand-up comedian of all time. Right? Absolutely. So I love Mike Birbiglia with my whole heart, and he is the one who got John Mulaney into stand-up comedy. And so they did a podcast together. Mike Birbiglia came out with a new stand-up show called The New One. It's about his baby, and so he made a podcast called The Old Ones, reflecting on all of his old shows and people he had done stand-up comedy with. And so he was doing this podcast with John Mulaney, and they were talking about when they went on tour together. And Mike was looking at John one day, and he said, you know, John, you just gotta be better. And they were talking about that, and John was talking about this one joke. And I didn't really think of much when I was watching Mike's show, but then like afterward I've rewatched it and I've begun to appreciate it from the standpoint of another stand-up comedian, where Mike Birbiglia is talking about how when he was in his 20s, I don't know if this is very appropriate for school, he was drinking a lot, and so he was drinking even at the laundromat. He would go with his friends and they would drink together, and he was talking about how he would feel like it was so much of a party that it was like a pirate ship, and he was telling the old woman Margaret at the laundromat, Margaret, set the machines to permanent press. And John Mulaney was talking about how that was the model for all of the jokes he had written afterward, because he had built a whole world around him in that laundromat, and you could picture it, and you could also see the pirate ship after that. And so I feel like I've begun to appreciate that joke a lot more because I saw it before I thought of myself as a stand-up comedian, and now I can see it afterward.
Thank you all so much for being here.
And to Mr. Delaney for making these posters, and to Ms. Burnett for dealing with me still not doing the outside designation. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you very much. Very good.